using Tom's theme of bridges, in essence, a budget is a bridge between the priorities and goals that the county has and the resources available to it. And that's what we're aiming for.
Great picture of the Melbourne Bridge there.
Is that what it is? So, okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Supervisor Smith.
Thank you. Allison, just it was sort of a question I've been holding. It could have come forward at different points here. Yeah, I believe in April we're going to be hearing from the interim retirement administrator, Tim Knudsen, on the actuarial report that is given to the Board of Supervisors every year. Mm-hmm. And there were some delays, and I think the compilation of that, but it's happening. My understanding is that sometime in April the board will be hearing that. What has the executive office done, and do you have the figures on a discussion that we've had today, which will now be reoccurring on the unfunded liabilities that the county has? We are basically, I believe, in the pension obligation bonds, that's a 90% funding level, and we still need to have a plan to capture that 100% funding. And I believe that we were going to restructure, there was going to be an agreement that would be restructured where we would add 0.75% towards payment for the next, I don't know, 10, 11 years or so. That is going to be a significant impact to the general fund. Do you know that, roughly speaking, that dollar amount, and what are your plans to get that going forward?
Okay, what I'd say is Jennifer can speak specifically to discussions she's had with Tim, but our intention is to, in the next month, have a meeting with the executive office and the retirement administrator and talk about where we are with all of that. And we don't have a dollar amount projection at this time, but the pension obligation bonds and the underfunded POB debt, those are listed under debts and liabilities, and it is very much in our minds and in our telescope or microscope as we go through the budget process. So we will be able to come back with what that might mean in terms of this next year's budget.
Do you have any ballpark in terms of the dollar amount?
At this point,
I recall something like $600,000 additional per year that would have to come from the general fund to meet that obligation. That's just a recall, and it may not be that, but
for the increase up to 100%.
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, the number, it's not set in concrete, but the number that Tim Knudsen gave me the other day was we have an $893,000 payment left on our unfunded liability on that 4.2. And what we could do, and we need to discuss this further, is look at whether or not we want to take the option of using the savings to pay that off. Right now we're going to be able to pay it off 1 year early on the original amortization. We can use the savings of around $400,000 to possibly push that amortization out to the intended 5 years that we initially had it, and use that towards the 100%. But a few things have to happen first. Number one, the board has to listen, and agree that they want to do that. Number two is we have a policy in place that needs to be changed if that's the case, because we're only, having to do this at 90. Right. So before we can even look at those options, the board would have to consider what they want to do.
Well, we've had the discussion before, and I thought this budget year we were going to be getting a proposal, so I didn't want that to be lost in all these other discussions. It's a difficult one to take on, but I think it's not, in a sense, unlike the teeter, in that if you constantly take 10% of your debt obligation off the table and you're continuing to pay interest on it, you're not getting anywhere. So it really is similar to the teeter in that way, and I think that we need to just step up and figure out what that repayment plan is going to look like.
Yeah, and we will do that. There is a listing of debts and liabilities that we will update when usually we give it to you at the May workshop. So we may have it earlier than that.
Well, I think we need to make sure that maybe you need to be prepared when Tim Knudsen gives his report to the board, because it is in the actuarial report, and I believe the actuaries attend, they have in the past, and that's an opportunity to ask those discussions. And they made recommendations last year, they're making them this year on how far out we can go, and I think it was something like it would be to extend the contractual obligation that we have with the retirement system, extend that, but then wrap in that 10% into that, and then it would get us on a repayment plan, so then it would be added to our lists of debts and liabilities that we would adhere to that repayment plan.
And I think that's a really good idea for us to be prepared to speak at that
Good.
time on the budget impasse. So.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Carmel? Before she comes up, Allison, one last question. In the projection, potential state cuts, has there been any discussion in funding reductions for area agency on aging, anything like that? There's been some proposed for children's care and in-home support services. I was just wondering.
A lot of the area agency on aging funding is federal, and so, and what's happened with that is they haven't necessarily cut it, but they haven't increased it either, which is the same as a cut
Right.
over time. I'm not sure how much in the way of state funding is in that. Whatever state funding may well be slated for that same 10% cut, and you know, we can certainly talk to Susan Era about what those possibilities are.
Yeah, I just asked that we keep our eye on
Yeah.
the horizon there, and because we're all going to be there.
Yes, we are, sometimes more rapidly than we always. Thanks.
And I know you want to move this on, but because of the additional funding that's coming through in transportation, and public transit gets a block of that, and the only public transit agency we have in this county is MTA. I think there's an opportunity, because like senior centers and things like that, a lot of the issues are transportation. But I think there's an opportunity here to take some of those dollars that we were using to buy buses and whatnot to give to our senior centers to help with their transportation needs, because like Wheels on Meals and those programs have to do with, so the money goes through MTA, but they can actually allocate the money to those programs. So I think there's an opportunity here to help the senior citizens address some of those issues through transportation.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wattenberger, members of the board. I'm Carmel Angelo, Director for the Health and Human Services Agency. 5 minutes is all I want, no PowerPoint. Okay. I'd like to speak to you today regarding the ongoing agency development. And back in '06, it was with great foresight of this board that you directed the creation of the Health and Human Services Agency. This was bringing 3 key departments together. That's approximately 700 staff and $105 million in programs and services to this county. As the staff and the branch directors were tooling the agency, if you recall back in June of '07, we were surprised to learn that we had a $1.2 million budget deficit in mental health. While the agency covered that deficit, we also committed to this board that we would reduce any further mental health deficits. Once we began digging deep into mental health, what we learned is that we didn't have the right tools to do the job. So that's when we developed the Administrative Services Unit for the agency. As a side regarding the mental health budget, we agreed that we would reduce the labor costs, seeing the labor costs being the largest chunk that was in overage for the budget. We stopped the bleed in the labor costs by defunding vacant positions. That's what we did. We didn't have to lay off last year. We don't have to lay off this year. We defunded approximately 20 positions. We actually have approximately 30 vacancies in mental health right now. However, we still have out-of-county placement costs, and the overage there we're projecting is approximately $350,000. The rest of the overage has to do with the interest that we owe and also A87 costs. As we move forward, you'll see that we're working on a mental health program redesigned to close the gap next year and the year after with the mental health deficit. So with the Administrative Services Unit, we can now measure what we're doing. We can manage our staff resources.